Selectmen's meeting, May 21st, 7:03 p.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a fairly lengthy agenda. We have reorganization of the board, review regular session meeting minutes from April 23rd. We have a couple of invited guests tonight, Representative David Meridian, and also from the Men's Club, Bill McCormick. We have a couple of discussion items tonight. We have town manager's report and some look-ahead topics. And then, of course, public comment. So we'll start with agenda item number 1, which is, I guess it would be 1.1, which is reorganization of the board.
So I'd like to make a motion to appoint the executive assistant Sandra Hakala as the temporary chair for the purpose of reorganization of the board.
Yes.
Make that unanimous action.
I'd like to open the nominations for chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Are there any nominations?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Selectman Metellian as chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Second. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'd like to close the nominations. Is there a motion to appoint Selectman Metellian, chairman of the Board of Selectmen?
I move that we appoint Selectman Metellian as chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Second?
Okay, unanimous action, majority action.
And you're going to rescind?
I didn't know I
You
could
make
vote
make
for myself.
Make a motion to rescind.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to rescind the former motion appointing Executive Assistant Sandra Hakala as temporary chair, and also to thank former Selectman Gary Doherty for his service to the town, and return the board to regular session.
Second?
Yes.
And
Yes.
make that yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. So we're on to agenda item 2.0, review meeting. It would be the regular session meeting minutes from April 23rd. Any discussion?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 23rd and May 2nd.
I would abstain.
Yep.
I'll second the motion. Make that majority action. Okay, we'll move on to our invited guest, Representative David Meridian. Thank you for coming.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And seeing as you had mentioned it being a lengthy schedule, I'll try to be fairly brief. But I wanted to make sure that I came in on this day for a couple of reasons. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the House budget because we concluded that in April. But before I get into that, I do want to thank Selectman Doherty for his years of service to the town. I also want to congratulate you, Maureen. It's an exciting election, and we're excited to have you on board. I'm willing to work with you in any endeavor that you wish. So we have a great partnership here, and I want to make sure that that continues.
Thank
so
you, David.
congratulations. To get into it, in April, so just as a way of background, second week of April, the budget comes out. It comes out on a Wednesday, about 2 in the afternoon. We have until that Friday at 5 p.m. to file amendments. Not that long, so you need to kind of know what you're looking for. So we go through that whole process, and in that time, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 to 1,300 amendments were filed to the House budget. So then we have all of school vacation week to try to sift through them, read through them, see what you would like to support, see what you might be opposed to, and anywhere in between. Then that leads into the last full week of April, which is where we had our budget debate. So we went back and forth on the budget debate, and I want to just give you a couple of the numbers. I think you might already be privy to them, but for the people here in attendance and the many watching at home, I want to make sure that you're aware. So for the House numbers for Chapter 70 for Upton, was $39,799. And for Mendon Upton was $12,448,756. And then unrestricted general government aid, which is affectionately referred to as UGA, was $14,863. So if we're looking just at those three, we have a difference somewhere in the neighborhood of a little shy of $50,000 over last year. If you look at the House 1 or the governor's budget that came out in January, the House kind of looked at that as a roadmap, something to build upon. You saw a $20 per pupil in the governor's budget. With due respect to any governor, I don't think that that's adequate, and I was not happy with that. I was certainly going to sign on. I did sign on to get it to $50 per pupil. I was going to sign on to $100 if that's what we were looking at. Unfortunately, we couldn't find the revenues to get quite there, but I'm proud to say that we did get it to $30 per pupil in the House. A couple other local things that we were able to secure in working with the town manager. I know that we did have a couple of public safety initiatives that were kind of paramount, and I'm fortunate to say that we were able to secure a portion of funding, $25,000, in a local earmark that will go towards public safety improvements here in the town of Upton. We also secured $5.5 million for the public-private partnership that we have with the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts. So, as you may know, it's the only veterinary school in the Commonwealth and really the Northeast. And so it's a wonderful partnership where we can support them in their endeavors to try to help local kids with defrayed costs and tuition going there, but it also helps out all of our communities. I know with them not having dorms, many of the students are renting locally, they're shopping locally, they're commuting through locally. So I think it's an asset for all of us kind of in our area, 495 and the Blackstone Valley. I was also able to secure $250,000 for an early college pathways grant program. It was funded at $3 million last year. One of the school committee members from Northridge made me aware that it got cut down to $1.5 million. And I know that in Northridge, kids definitely took advantage of it, and I believe they are here as well. So I tried to fight to get it back to $3 million. We didn't get quite there, but we got another $250,000 into it. So those were kind of the more centralized highlights of the budget. I'm also proud to say that it had no broad-based tax increases. We have about a $43 billion budget, and we didn't need to raise the tax for it. So we tried to live within our means. Now I want to let you know what happened just after we had our budget debate, and that's when all of the returns came in and all of the numbers from April, and the April tax receipts surged. So December and January, we hit a big lull. Like we were building up every year over benchmark, and then December and January we hit a cliff, and we were down almost $500 million. We fought back in the next couple of months, and then in April we ended up going over $1 billion in the plus. There's a lot to be said for that. Some of it is a change in the federal tax code in terms of when people file, things of that nature. But the majority of that is one-time funding that's coming from somewhat of a volatile funding source. So we want to be careful with that. I've been pushing already to try to see. I think it's going to be difficult if the Senate, should I say, just goes crazy with pushing forward like Chapter 70, because then if you see it as one time, unfortunately, we don't want you to build your revenues and your budget off of that next year, not remembering that. So I think a much more practical approach would be a supplemental budget, which you may remember last year we did for Chapter 90 for roads and repairs. So I think that's a much more practical way of approaching it. I think that the majority will go to stabilization or our rainy day fund to make sure that we're prepared for whatever the future might have in store. But with 2 months to go in fiscal year 19, as of when this came out, the tax collections were up 8% or $1.8 billion over the 10-month period in 2018. So we're shooting over our benchmark, which is a good thing, which leads me into talking to you about the Senate budget, because the Senator, Mike Moore, is right now advocating in Boston as they're debating the Senate budget. They have that option and the positive effect of having an extra month so they can see these returns come in, so their numbers can hopefully be higher. And I will gladly support fighting for higher in terms of dollars coming back, higher Chapter 70, higher UGA per pupil, all of those things. Even local earmarks, if we can get an additional dollar there. So that's kind of what they're going through now. It remains to be seen what their budget will come out looking like. It'll be out sometimes by the end of this week. But that's a quick update for you. Proud to be your representative, and I'm certainly eager and willing to answer any questions you may have. Maureen, congratulations again.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I do not, but thank you very much. It's great work, great news.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. I have nothing either. So,
Great job.
Thank you. This was easy. I should make all of my boards like this.
Just if I could, just so folks realize the impact of Rep. Meridian's hard work at the State House, that's a net increase of $33,000 that he's brought locally to this year's budget. So we budgeted last year's numbers, and because we're conservative, and so given that hard work, that's an increase of $33,000. So, and we all know how tight our budget was this year, so that's going to be extremely helpful going into the tax rate setting season.
Great.
And if I may repay the favor to the town manager, we just had some public safety grants come down the pipeline. And while they haven't been allocated quite yet, once I was made aware of them, I reached out directly to my 3 town managers or administrators, and I said, this is grant funding. To me, that's like more Chapter 70 coming back. That's money we didn't have, and it's certainly money we need. So please apply. Please work with the town to apply. And Derek definitely did. Mendon Upton, I know, is in the queue in terms of being in the application process. Blackstone Valley Tech as well. So it's looking good, but nothing definitive that we can at least say yet.
Good. Nice work, Derek.
there we go.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Can I ask for you
Yes.
a very good question? I'm not trying to sandbag you, but a lot of people, we get the cherry sheet, and then we get the cherry sheet charges, which basically are deductions from the cherry sheet. Can you explain, I think I know the answer, but other people don't realize it, that why do we get a deduction from the MBTA district?
From MBTA, there are many different things that make up that. I mean, when you factor into transportation costs, if you want to look at, say, Chapter 90, it's not quite the MBTA, but I think it's kind of similar to where you get into. So it's made up of a formula, and the formula hits employment, road miles, population in town. So with all those different driving factors, that's what you end up seeing come the end of the day. If you have differences in terms of socioeconomic impacts within the town, things of that nature, I think that's where you see some of the changes to try to make whole.
You just see it, and you say, we have this Grafton, this Westboro, this Southborough, Hopkinton,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have any MBTA service here.
Sure.
But
Oh,
yet,
understood.
we get whacked for it.
It's just
And it
like
just-
how
it
we all
just
get whacked
doesn't-
going to Boston every day on the Pike, where there's no other tolls anywhere in the Commonwealth for roads except the Pike that we all feel every day that we drive in.
I'll do something
Right.
about that one.
Work on that one.
Well, also the MBTA is subsidized, so I imagine.
It's absolutely subsidized, and
Yeah.
obviously having the commuter rail cut through on the Framingham-Worcester line, there's things to take into account for that as well.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Those charges were $53,000.
Really?
You know what I actually was gonna ask him, and I forgot, is the 12,448,756, has that gone up? Or was that their original projection in the governor's budget?
12 million?
12 million for Mendon.
Amended up?
Oh, Mendon Upton.
Yeah. Has that number gone up? There's one thing I forgot to ask them.
The per pupil, yeah, when they were budgeting for $20 per pupil, it's gone up to.
The other number, the big number. I guess we'll let that one go. All right, we're on to, again, invited guests. Number 3.2 was supposed to be a discussion on the dog park proposal, but Bill Taylor's unavailable to make it, so we are going to table that till next meeting. So, invited guest 3.3 on the agenda, Men's Club, Bill McCormick.
Thank you.
Please come forward.
So I'm here today to take a next step on a project that we
open dialogue with the selectmen a couple of years ago, and maybe, Steve, you were the only selectman here at the time. That's how much time has gone by. But what we want to work on is a project to put banners on the telephone poles from Elm Street to Mechanic Street, perhaps every other pole, and it's a long process to get the approval. So what prompted coming tonight was I presented the town manager with a form that needs a signature to advance the project with Verizon. So he advised that perhaps you all would like to be aware of the project and see where we're going with this. So the pictures there are just samples that I printed out. We haven't picked any designs, or we haven't picked any of that yet. But to show you roughly what the banners would look like, they're about 18 inches wide by 36 inches high, each mounted with poles, top and bottom. And those poles are wrapped around the telephone poles with what you might call like a hose clamp. You screw it on tight. And so that's kind of what they look like, a top and a bottom pole, so they don't flap, they don't move. Past projects when we had American flags years ago, the flags got wrapped around the poles quite often. And there's still a couple of those remnants out there. We'll clean those up as we go. So the men's club is looking to get approval from Verizon first. Verizon comes out and does an inventory. We've given them all the pole numbers. They're going to come out and look and make sure those poles are appropriate for whatever concerns they would have, okay? When this form is then signed and they do that, when they do their inventory and their review of the poles, then they say to National Grid, who's higher up on the pole, we're good with everything down here where the banners are going to be, but you guys have final say. So it's a couple-step approval process for Verizon and National Grid. We don't know the time frame it'll take for them to act on this, but again, tonight I wanted to give you information so we can at least go ahead and get the approvals for this project. We understand that there's height guidelines. You know, we don't want them where trucks will hit them or any of those things, so we'll be given all those dimensions from Verizon. And our plan is that the men's club members will install these when we get them. So we think that, you know, I think normal bridge clearance is 13 feet or something, so it's probably 14 feet is the bottom, 17 feet is the height. So we can do those off a little extension ladder off the sidewalk. It wouldn't be a big deal at all. We're not sure how many there really will end up being based on their review of the poles. We think there might be about 60 of these. Okay, so that's the gist of what we're trying to do. We need to go ahead at this point just to allow the investigation of those two utility companies. Ultimately, when we know what the final flag count will be, we'll come up with some designs of flags that we will choose from, and we'll come back with a budget request, most likely against the beautification fund, to do this project. So with that, I open up for any questions that you might have.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
I don't. This is something that we've looked at, and being a member of the men's club, I've seen the proposals and the work that's been done, and I know there's already been, sounds like, conversations with Verizon and National Grid in the past, so it's just sort of brushing off those conversations. And I think it's a great idea. I've seen these in other towns, and I think they look great. The main thing is, over time, making sure that whatever's there stands the test of time and is either replaced or doesn't end up looking, you know, raggedy in 5 or 6 years. But I think it's a great idea and can add a nice touch to the town. And what do you expect, or what are you thinking we would put on them? Sponsorships, holiday themes?
Haven't gone that far. We could sell sponsorships. Some towns do that. Mendon did that. We could do that, but we had that same opportunity when we did the Welcome to Upton signs, and we didn't go down that route. We thought it would look nicer and cleaner without any of that kind of sponsorship on it. So that project was funded without sponsors. So we don't really have a good budget request at this point. I would throw out a number to say 6,000 might get us through the first pass of these. But again, some towns go every quarter. They change it for the season. I don't know how far we'll go with that, but I anticipate we'll at least have one good set of flags to start, and then we'll work it from there.
And then the men's club will change them, and if they're supposed to, if you want to swap them out for a season or whatever, so it's the men's club that will sort of maintain them and do whatever needs to be done to keep them looking good. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
I think Brett has touched on everything, and I would agree it's a great project.
Great, so with that, I emailed Derek the form a few weeks back, so whenever you've got the opportunity to send that back, I appreciate it.
There is one other thing. Now, in the past, I believe we did have some signs that were put up. I think town clerk may have some knowledge. Are any of those still usable? Are they this basic size?
Those signs that we had in the past, with the renovation, they were stored in a container that ended up getting mold. So those signs are no longer with us, so we don't have them. I guess my concern is, I know the concern the last time was the bucket truck. Do you have access, the men's club have access to a bucket truck?
We think we can do it off just a ladder off the sidewalk.
Okay. I know in the past it was a bucket truck.
We did think big thoughts way back when. It's way simpler than we thought, though.
Okay.
The only other question I would have is, I understand there was some discussion about two telephone poles opposing each other somewhere on High Street, maybe or Hartford Ave by Dunkin' Donuts, to string a banner across. Someone was approaching the board, I thought, on a project, something like that. No?
Hasn't come yet. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
I've gotten this far.
You
Okay.
talking about stringing a banner, is that the question?
To string a banner across the road, so if it can say like the fireworks for the month before, like the selectmen approved the signs that go on the islands, it would be a similar process in our mind. But someone had been talking about a project like that, and I
The
don't.
working group that helped develop the vision for the town center, they wanted to acquire a banner that they could advertise the Imagine Upton website.
Right.
And we didn't think, that I deferred to Mr. Westgate, our DPW director, who has a lot of experience in this, and we didn't think that there were any poles that were appropriate to hang that type of banner. And there's certain requirements, wind requirements, so you just can't hang it to any structure. So, that's something that certainly could be considered down the road, but I don't think we have anything at this time that we could do.
Okay, so no one's approached you on that yet. I gotta figure out who that was.
Do you know now on this, you said would be basically 36 inches. I don't know what the low-hanging, say cable wires are, and naturally, you have to stay over that 14-foot. So I wonder if you may be forced to use a smaller flag or a smaller, advertiser or banner.
I think that'll be part of Verizon's review when they come out and look and see how low they are on any of those poles, because I don't think they know either.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome, great.
Okay, moving on to discussion items. 4.1, motion to authorize the town manager to execute the E.L. Harvey agreement for solid waste and recycling. So most people in attendance know we have a substantial increase in our waste and recycling fees this year, as appropriated in the 2020 budget. So I'll hand this off to you, Derek.
Sure. So this, as you just explained, this has been well discussed at town meeting and even prior to town meeting. The Board of Health, to their credit, they went out to bid. E.L. Harvey was the most responsive bidder in this case. So the request is to execute, it's a one-year agreement. It's for a total of $357,000, which does not include at this time our tonnage freight, so we'll pay that separately outside of this contract. So $357,000, it's a one-year contract with the option to renew 2 additional times.
Okay. Either of my fellow selectmen have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I think we covered them at the town meeting. I make a motion that we approve the E.L. Harvey contract for $357,000 for 1 year.
Second?
Make that unanimous action. On item 4.2, we need to vote to execute the intermunicipal nursing agreement with Blackstone. This is something that's been in place for a few years now, and once again, I'll turn this over to you, Derek. You can speak to this.
Sure. So this is an intermunicipal agreement. It requires a signature of all 3 board members. This is a public health nursing intermunicipal agreement with the town of Blackstone. Historically, the town has been in partnership with not only Blackstone, but Bellingham as well. And so this year, Bellingham has chosen not to renew the contract. So We're going to just execute one contract with the town of Blackstone. The cost is approximately $9,000 per year. That money's already been appropriated to the operating budget, and what happens is the Board of Health Office, they will then invoice the town of Blackstone on a monthly basis to recover the $9,000 that we've already appropriated.
Okay. Very good. Any questions?
So talk a little bit about what the health nurse does.
Sure. So the public health nursing services primarily, the primary focus is communicable disease follow-up. So, for example, when folks don't know what that means, if you were to contract a communicable disease here in town, so say you were diagnosed with Giardia, the state sends a report to our public health nurse. Our public health nurse then has to reach out to that patient, do a case history, and then send that information back to the state, or the state's epidemiologist. They'll collate that information and look for certain trends throughout Massachusetts. So that's a primary function. Other functions is the public health nurse will hold flu clinics during flu season, and then also follows up on various types of nuisance complaints, housing complaints, if there's hoarding, and things of that nature.
Great.
Okay. Very good.
I make a motion that we approve the intermunicipal agreement between the public health nurses and the towns of Blackstone and Upton.
Second.
Make that unanimous action. Okay, on to discussion item 4.3, a motion to authorize easement payments for the TIP project. Would invite our DPW director, Dennis Westgate. Come on up and.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
In 2017, town meeting authorized the Board of Selectmen to obtain through the eminent domain process all easements, permanent and temporary, associated with the reconstruction of Hartford Ave North, High Street, and Hopkinton Road, otherwise known as the TIP project. The motion that you have in front of you tonight that was put together by Town Council represents the end of our right-of-way acquisitions for Phase 1 of this project. Phase 1, as a reminder, takes us from the Hopkinton town line to approximately 800 feet past Pratt Pond up High Street. And it includes putting the signals at the Westboro Road, School Street, High Street, Hopkinton Road intersection. So what you have before you is a motion to authorize the payment based on the fair market appraisals that was done by two separate appraisal companies, determining the fair market value of the permanent and temporary easements, and to pay that money out. And this, like I said, this marks the end of our right-of-way acquisition process for Phase 1. So this is a pretty good turning point for Phase 1. Phase 2 will start shortly thereafter. I'll be sending out letters of offer, and we'll be going through the process of meeting with all the residents out there and discussing the ones that have questions, and then I'll be back in front of this board probably the end of June, beginning of July, to authorize payment for Phase 2.
Okay. Very good. Any questions?
Have we notified and been in communication with all of the impacted landowners?
Everyone that had notified me. There's probably a handful that we didn't get a return receipt from.
Yeah.
Because they were changing properties during the process. I think there was maybe 6 or 8, Brett, that they actually sold during the process.
Got it.
But all of the really important ones, the ones that had something to really talk about,
Yeah.
I have to keep a diary, and I have to submit that to MassDOT, including all of the correspondence and discussions, and it's lengthy. It's a book.
Yeah. Good.
And it went very well. Most of the easements out there are temporary easements.
Yeah.
That's the bulk of them.
Great.
Very good.
I make a motion to authorize the easement payments for the TIP project.
Second.
Make
Motion
that-
You
has
want-
to- It has to be written.
It has,
Oh, this here, sorry. I move that the board vote to execute an order of taking for the High Street Hopkinton Road Mass DOT project as prepared by town council, and authorize the treasurer or designee to pay compensation to the property owners affected by the project in accordance with the appraisals obtained by the town and with respect to the property at 130 High Street, the appraised value plus $2,800 as negotiated with the owner. I understand that the parcel owner has been removed from the project T66, so we'll make that change.
That was passed, the first paragraph was actually the motion.
Motion, okay, thank you.
Second.
Make that unanimous action? That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to discussion item 4.4, which is to elect an associate member to the planning board. There were two applications. One is a long-standing associate member, William Tessmer, and I believe the other one, I cannot remember his first name now.
David Brooks?
David Brooks is the other applicant for that position. So, any discussion? Or would anybody like to nominate either one of the two candidates?
I don't know Mr. Tessmer. I know Mr. Brooks has been involved with the Economic Development Committee. It sounds like, how long has Mr. Tessmer been a member of the planning board, do we know?
He's been, I would say at least 10 years.
And you-
So he's been the only associate member of the planning board since they implemented it so many years ago. And it's
Got
been- This is either his fourth or fifth reappointment or
Yeah.
reelection.
Yeah. Is this the first time anyone has come up as a?
I think there was
Just
one
been a
other
couple.
time there was another interested party,
Mhm.
but as an associate member, they activated only if a matter before them needs, like.
But voting members not available.
Yeah, not available, and
Yep.
Mr. Chestnut, I believe, still goes to every planning board meeting,
Mhm.
even if he's not a
Yep.
voting member.
I have known him from town for at least 30 years, so as far as I know, he's doing a very good job.
Okay.
So,
I'm just learning, so I don't know either of them. Are either of the candidates here?
I don't believe so. I don't see either one.
Well, then I would go with what the board would wish.
Okay. I would nominate Mr. Tessmer,
Second?
so
Yes.
I'll make that official then. I'll make a motion to appoint William Tessmer to the planning board as an associate member.
Second?
Second?
Yes.
Okay, so unanimous action. Thank you. Okay. So we are on to, I believe it's item 4-5, discussion of the 6 Main Street appraisal. So we have, everyone has read the appraisal. Again, this is the home that is abutting the Rustine building. The appraisal came in at $100,000. I'll hand this off to you, Mr. Randisi.
Sure.
Just a little update.
Yeah, sure. So this is, there's no formal action that has to be taken tonight, but I wanted to talk to the board about this because this came up approximately 6 months ago when the owner of 6 Main Street approached the town, who has asked the town if we'd be willing to acquire the property. And so I went ahead, per the board's instruction, and ordered an appraisal. That appraisal came in, as you stated, at $100,000. I've since communicated with the property owner, and who has reviewed the appraisal with his attorney. They are now currently ordering a separate appraisal. The main reason for that is because the assessed value through the Board of Assessors office is approximately $125,000, but the appraisal came in at $100,000, so they're second guessing the appraisal, if you will. And so they still are very interested in selling this property to the town, but they want to wait until they get their appraisal before they come back to the town and have their discussion.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that came in less than what we had talked about. I think we sort of had in our heads a different number. So it's all, that's why it's important to have these appraisals done so that we don't overpay for anything. Great.
Right. Yeah, and it looked like it was pretty thorough, the appraisal that was done.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Very thorough.
Great job.
right. Okay, very good. Any other comments?
The only thing I would say is that this is an example of one of those things that we can use the monies for either through the Economic Development Committee or through the Board of Selectmen that were approved at town meeting as discretionary spending money. So this is just a great example of how that money can be used.
So I'll report back to the board as soon as I hear back from the property owner, and at that time, we'll have a better sense of what their expectations are for a sale price, and then I would expect that we'll at least start negotiations and to see if we can all agree on the sales price, if the board, deems it's still a high priority for fall town meeting.
Okay, very good. Okay, moving on. Discussion item 4.6, the motion to approve various donations. There is actually one donation here in front of us for the Council of Aging. From the church, actually, one of the Emmanuel Chapel's church has a donation that has been offered or given to the Council of Aging for $2,000. So, any discussion?
No, I think it's just a very generous gift to the Council on Aging, so thank you to the Emmanuel Chapel of Upton. It's wonderful.
Okay. I'll take a motion.
I make a motion that we accept the donation from Emmanuel Chapel in the amount of $2,000 to the Council on Aging.
Second.
Make that unanimous action. Okay, on to 4.7 on the discussion items, which is our liaison assignments. The Board of Selectmen, each member of the Board of Selectmen has various committees that they are the liaison to. They can meet with, or if there's information that needs to come to the board, those different committees can reach out to their prospective or respective selectmen. So in this instance, through email, we had discussed, and I believe everyone is satisfied with that idea. We'll take Gary Doherty's liaison assignments, which are the Board of Assessors, the Capital Budget Committee, Finance Committee, and the Mendon Upton Regional School District. So we'll take those particular liaison assignments, and we'll designate those to our new selectman, Maureen Gwinnett.
Accepted.
All right.
And just to be clear, we didn't discuss it on email. I sent a note to Sandy asking if we could have the assignments that we had last year and just renew those, and so that we could see what they were. And so I have the Affordable Housing Trust, the Board of Health, the Library Trustees, and RecCom. And I think I have it here,
Yes.
BBT, Planning Board, ZBA, Treasurer Collector. These are all on the website, the Upton Mass website. So they're there for any committee or person that's interested in reviewing this. Thanks.
And it takes a little while, really, to familiarize yourself with those assignments. So to go just a year and then scramble them all up again, it's probably more trouble than it's worth. So I think this is the best way to handle it.
Great.
All right. So let's see.
Yeah.
All right. So we are on to 4.8, discuss the summer meeting schedule. We have proposed 2 meetings for the month of June, and then basically July and August are up for discussion. We don't have to reach a binding agreement right now, but it's something to look forward to. Does anybody have any suggestions for July and August? Typically, we would meet once in each of those 2 months.
So in June, we've got the 4th and the 18th.
Yes.
Is that right? I am not around the 6th or the 13th of August. July, I'm around anytime.
So I guess the question, I was speaking with Mr. Brindisi earlier, and the question is, how many weeks should we go between that last meeting in June till our first meeting in July, or our only meeting in July?
And I mean, I think the thing that's, so the 16th is the middle of July, and that would put us 4 weeks from the 18th. So I guess we could go the 9th or the 16th. Either way, if anything comes up, I think we're all amenable to having a meeting. If something comes up that's time sensitive,
It's pressing.
if it's pressing, we'll schedule a meeting and have a meeting and post it and do whatever we have to do, so.
Yeah, to take care of business as needed.
Of course. So I would say either the 9th or the 16th of July.
Okay. Why don't we keep this on the budget, on the agenda here until next meeting, and we'll shore it up. I think you may have a conflict on one of those dates. So why don't we do that? We'll table this for now, but we'll have a definite schedule set up for our next meeting, which will be June 11th. All right. All right, and we are going to pass over 4.9, I think we got on here. Year-end budget transfers, we don't have all of those in just yet. There's usually, the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom have to approve those. We're not really towards the end of the budget season just yet, so we'll wait till our next meeting where we'll have a more complete list of that.
June 18th, I met with the department staff today, and, you know, given some invoices with some of the departments still waiting to see and some things that have arisen this past week, we think it's best, and having met with the town accountant, that we wait until the June 18th meeting. It's as close to the end of the fiscal year as possible, and so we feel like we'll have a better sense of our budgets by then. And I propose that we submit all the budget year-end transfers as one big package on that evening.
Okay.
Versus doing it piecemeal over the course of 2 or 3 meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. Any comments or any questions?
Nope.
All right. All right. So, budget item 5.0, recognition. Does anybody have anything under recognition?
No. The only thing, this isn't recognition as much as a reminder for folks about the Memorial Day activities scheduled for Monday that start off early in the morning, and then I think mid-morning we have some activities planned in the town common, the parade and all that, so we encourage people to come out and honor our veterans.
It's a good time, and it's very informative. You actually learn a lot about your town. So folks in attendance, folks at home, I'll be honest with you, there's cemeteries in town that you drive past them, you hardly know they're there. And when you hear the stories and you put the names together, it's very good insight into the history of the town. So to echo your thoughts, it's well worth attending. Not to mention the reading of all the names. It's very patriotic thing.
Mr. Chairman, to your point, the old cemetery down at Grove Street, if you don't know what's there, you ain't gonna find it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, those gravestones are from the 1700s. Many of them are, up on into the 1800s. And interesting anecdotes. One of our historians will read some interesting anecdotes, speeches that were given, dating back to Revolutionary times. So it's, again, well worth attending. So,
Very much so.
yes. All right. We'll go on to 6.0 on the agenda. Town Manager's Report.
Great, thank you. So I did want to mention the Memorial Day Parade, so thank you for talking about that. Just for some greater detail, the parade is set to begin at 10:15. It's going to start off from Memorial School and travel down to the town common, where at 10:45, that's when the ceremony begins, when the readings begin. And prior to that, there is a group of individuals that travel to each one of the 3 cemeteries. The first one will start at the Lakeview Cemetery at 8 a.m., where they do, they play the national anthem in each one of those and have a moment of silence. So, like I said, it is a great event. But for those folks that are interested in attending, that's the layup for the morning. For a few other announcements, since we're talking about announcements, we also have on Saturday, June 1st, from 8 a.m. to noon, the annual hazardous waste and paper shredding event. So that's from 8 to noon. It's going to get the DPW. Folks can bring down their hazardous waste and their paper, and the town will take all that material away from them. Depending on the type of material, there will be a charge. So this is on the town website, has everything in detail, what the cost will be for certain materials. So go to the website. I think we sent it out on social media as well. you mentioned a little bit about the state coming down. So last week I was able to secure a date. The Undersecretary from Economic Development, Tim McGurthy, is going to be here at 8:30 at Town Hall on June 25th. Rep Meridian is also going to be present. He was able to secure a person, a engineer from Mass DOT. I think it's going to be the director. He's already been here once in the past, Director Barry Lorian. So we're hoping to get those two individuals here. Well, we are scheduled to get those two individuals here. And the goal really is to walk around the town center, show them the vision that was created by the working group and by the EDC, show them the 6 Main Street location and the proposed traffic reconfiguration, and have that conversation whether or not it's something that's realistic, if it can be accomplished given the type of traffic here through town. So that's one goal. The other goal is to look at the bridge. We know that culvert needs to be replaced, and then to also look at potentially, if we can't do the 6 Main Street cut through, is the roundabout the next option, which is what we've been talking about for a better part of a year now. And then lastly, meeting with Tim McGurthy, his shop, they administer the MassWorks grant. So after having that conversation, start talking about the state support and the MassWorks grant and state support through the Small Bridge Program to remedy all of our infrastructure needs so that we can get this project moving. And then we will also have a representative from Mass Development. If you remember, Mass Development was the organization we submitted the grant to help us write the RFP, to hire a technical advisor to help us write the RFP. So it's great to know that they're going to be present as well for that tour. So hopefully that looks positive that we'll get that grant, but there hasn't been any assurances just yet.
Just a quick, if I may, a question on that. I know we have there's the MassWorks grant, there's some other funding mechanisms out there. Is it something that could be put in as a TIP project as well? Would that ever qualify for TIP funding, or could we get into, I know that takes a very long time to get TIP funding approved, but is that ever used for these types of projects, or not really?
Well, the TIP project is mostly roads construction and drainage projects. With a TIP project, they don't typically get into like below the surface, so I think what you're referring to is like water main relocation, sewer main relocation. They don't typically get into that, and that takes years to get in the queue.
Yeah.
We do know, as I've reported in the past, that the state is also doing an analysis right now from William Street down to Brook Street. They have their $9 million set aside for a state TIP project down 140. So there is hope that that project will take place simultaneously with what we're trying to develop here as well. And that's why we all have to be on the same page. This is a state road, so any ideas that we have to be in lockstep with what the state is thinking about doing right now. And they had assured me in our last meeting that their consultant will be doing that analysis as they survey the layout of 140. They'll be doing that analysis of this intersection as well.
Great, so we'll make sure, whatever the planning that's in place, we'll make sure that all of that's coordinated, and that if we have sewer mains or water mains to replace and do, or culverts, we'll do all of that before the final pavement goes in.
That's right.
At the end of the project.
Right,
so.
right, exactly.
That's great.
So that is, no.
One other question. So the $9 million project, do we have a ballpark on when they're thinking of doing that? Is that within the next 5 years, or?
I'm led to believe 2023.
Okay.
But again, it's a state project. Remember, the TIP project was supposed to start in 2019 over here in Phase 1, and that's been moved to 2020. So 2023 is kind of their target. It'd probably realistically be pushed out a couple years beyond that, but that's what they're looking at right now.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Talking about roads, so as many of you have, I hope, have noticed that there's been a lot of road reconstruction in the past 2 to 3 weeks. The DPW with their contract engineers has spent approximately $800,000 on roads already. So you've seen Westboro Road, East Street Extension, Brook Street, Walker Drive's going to get repaved. I think South Street was a portion of South Street that was repaved. So a lot of road work being done. We plan on doing a full depth reclamation on Hartford Ave South. So Pulte is going to we hope to do a full depth down to the pump station. They're gonna pick up that cost because of the Pulte project, and then we'll do another full depth reclamation all the way down to 140. So, between local dollars, Chapter 90 dollars, and then the two tip projects, in the next 5 to 6 years, we're looking at over $23 million worth of new roads here in town. So that's a lot of new roads, and having talked to Dennis Westgate, once the local project is done, he wants to do a new road rating to get a sense of how our roads have improved, given the $1.8 million investment this coming summer.
Great.
So moving on, if any questions, please stop me. Quantus Beach Road, that road has been repaved, in the gatehouse, so been working very closely with Andrew St. George, the rec director, to make sure that gatehouse and the drop-off and the new parking in that area all meets AAB standards. So we've had an engineer on site. I think he's been there 3 times. That has just been complete. The only thing we have to do left to make that operational and compliant with AAB standards is just put the ramp in that accesses the new gatehouse. So again, another great job that has been completed this year.
So AAB is just to make it handicap accessible for those that may not know the acronym.
Yeah, it's just an architectural access board. It's what most people think of ADA. ADA is the federal level, AAB is the state level. And so talking about AAB, the upper ramp is almost complete. I feel like I've been saying that for 2 years now. We hope it'll be complete by the end of this week. So the contractor has to put a final top coat on the walkway itself and then paint the handrails in that parking lot, that upper parking lot, now that the ramp is going to be signed off on by the Center for Living and Working, and our building commissioner will be operational. We're hoping by the middle of next week we can open up that parking lot.
That's great.
Yep.
And then will they open it up and close? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's good news. It's been a long time waiting on that, especially the ramp project. It got delayed, of course, with materials and funding source and other things, so.
Will they be opening that parking lot up just for games and certain weekends and then closing it, or will it remain open all the time? Do you know?
I don't know
Parks and Rec,
definitely. It's more of a recreation question,
Yeah.
but I do know all of our other gates are closed by the police department at 8
That's what I-
o'clock.
yeah, that's
So
what I-
my assumption is it would
Follow
follow
that
suit.
same-
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And then the last thing I just wanted to bring up, I met with our senior center director this morning, Janice Nowicki, and she announced a $2,800 grant that she received. And although some folks would think it's a small grant, it's actually a grant that's going to allow her to purchase these assisted listening devices. So it'll be 10 headsets and then 2 microphones. It's mostly going to be used for people who have hard of hearing. So usually when I go down and talk to the seniors, a lot of times we have to put a big speaker on, so I can communicate with these folks. So these will be used, so if those folks who are hard of hearing, they can listen better, they can hear who's ever trying to communicate a message. So great work by her, just getting small dollars to make people's lives more enjoyable and easier, especially when they attend these large events.
Great, good for her.
Is it a state grant, do you know?
I don't know if it was a state grant or not. It was a $2,800 grant, and we had to match it by 25%. And so the generous donation by the church, we're going to use a portion of those funds for our 25% match.
That's awesome.
Yep, so it's good news.
It's always good to take advantage of grants. I mean, that's all, right, it's all money that's out there and available that helps us improve services and access for people without having to tax the residents in town, so that's great.
And then, like Rep Meridian talked about a couple of grants that the schools have submitted applications for. As he said, this is like Chapter 70 money. The money's available, so there's no reason that you can't go get it. And the earmark, we know we need defibrillators, and we plan on using that new public safety earmark to purchase new defibrillators, which normally we'd have to go to town meeting and ask for those types of appropriations.
Yes. No, it's great. I know one of the things I hear often from people is, hey, there are grants out there, we've got to go after this grant money, so it's good to see that people are actively doing that, and it's helping the town. It's great.
Yes. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so on to 7.0, which is new business. Anybody have any new business?
Not as yet.
Give it a week or two.
Yeah.
All right. We'll go over to look ahead topics. So 8.1, which we've talked about this a little bit in the past, or quite a bit in the past, which is to discuss the closure of Warren Street. As it's been brought up before, most people probably are aware, we could pick up some additional parking, and if we close off Warren Street, obviously it's a safety issue. We've had some near misses, people walking, across to and from business at Town Hall, or just to and from walking on 140. It's a little bit dangerous over there. It's been my thinking that it'd be nice to know what the state was thinking with regard to our traffic issues, rotary or a roundabout. Again, redirecting a road, with the different ideas that are out there with revisioning downtown here. So I was thinking it may be a good idea, if that meeting is on June 25th, see what the state is thinking before we do anything definitive on Warren Street. The downside to that is there's been some concerns that it's going to pick up an awful lot of traffic on Church Street, and there's preschool and daycare and whatnot on Church Street, so that would be the downside. There's a lot of traffic that is now currently going up Warren. Most likely, a percentage of that would then go up Church Street. So I'm not sure what my fellow board members think, but I would propose it'd be nice to know what happens on the 25th as far as, is it feasible, a rotary or a roundabout? The piece of land, that piece of reclaimed land that may go back, to the sidewalk, or reconfiguring Grove Street. So those were my concerns. Do you have any thoughts?
What's the timeline on the closure? What kind of timeline are we looking at?
So I guess first I'd start off by saying that, we've been at this for a better part of a year, looking at different configurations. The primary goal is to bring the handicap parking on this side of the building. The wintertime is extremely challenging for those folks that have to park on that side of the parking lot and try to navigate their way through the sidewalk on that side and then across Warren Street, which is really on the front, right on the cusp of 140, which is, as you know, a high-speed zone. So that's the main goal, and we'd like to be able to accomplish that prior to this winter season. And so we have a couple designs. We had a design engineer come who's given us a couple different options, and one of the options would allow head-in parking towards this side of the building. Right now we have about 14 parking spots in the parking lot. This new design, because it's head-in parking, it narrows the parking spaces so when they're not horizontal to the building, would then net an additional 7 new parking spots. So we have 21 spots in the parking lot versus the 14 we have now. So in order to accomplish that option, we would propose that we do a temporary closure of the road, and then to Selectman Letarian's point, spend the better part of 6 to 12 months and look at our traffic and see if that's created a problem by rerouting the traffic to the adjacent streets. But I guess to answer your point, we would really want to have the handicap parking moved to this side of the parking lot no later than mid-fall, and that's what we ran into last year, because we have to cut the sidewalk, we have to pour new concrete, and depending on the weather, you can only tent it for so long.
I think the temporary closure would give you a better idea of what the traffic situation is, and I would be prone to do something like that.
At some point, what I would propose that we do is, at a future board meeting, maybe we start the board meeting at 7 p.m. in the parking lot, and Kelly and I can show you the design, show you exactly what the layout would be. You can get a really good visual versus just giving you a layout on an engineered plan. And so, whether that be in June or July or sometime thereafter, I think what we're really trying to accomplish is whether or not you think that this is a a possibility so that we can go ahead and move forward with engineering. And then, again, we'd have to put this up to bid. That takes 30 days, award the contract. You're looking at up to 2 months to award a contract. So, the summer will go very quickly, and soon enough the fall will be here, and we'll be pressing the winter months.
So if we do a temporary closure and then build the new parking, are we able to reopen the road, or at that point we are not able to reopen the road because the new configuration doesn't accommodate through traffic,
We would be able to reopen it.
even with the new parking configuration?
Yes, we would definitely be able to reopen it, and that's why I think showing you visually what this would do, because in the design, it squares off the parking lot, and then it kind of reconfigures the access to the parking lot in the north part of the parking lot. I wouldn't do that reconfiguration until we're absolutely certain that this is going to be reopened. If we don't reopen the street, then we wouldn't have to do the reconfiguration. So I'd keep it the way it is for now, and then if we decide we want to reopen it, then we'd have to spend a little bit extra money to do the reconfiguration.
Yeah, got it.
Is that roundabout, would that interfere with that roundabout, Warren Street, where all the streets come together?
I think that closing Warren Street will mitigate the problems we have where you have 4 cars all stopped in the same spot looking at each other trying to determine who's going next. So that'll just, again, reduce it by 1 access point in there. But the roundabout certainly, like I said in the past, according to the engineers, it reduces speed down to 15 miles per hour. It keeps everybody moving in the same direction.
And one thing, Maureen, just because we've asked this in the past, and this has come up a few times, is the DPW director, police chief, and fire chief are all comfortable with closing down Warren
Yes.
Street. So I agree, there's no reason we wouldn't do something temporary to see what the impact is and see how everybody feels after 6 or 12 months.
Right, and then
Yeah.
you could always go back to the original if it's temporary.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I want to make sure, before we start reconfiguring the parking lot, as long as we know we can reopen it if we need to and still get the parking, then that's great. Yeah.
We have a question? Can I hear?
Yes, I want to make a comment, Greg kind of touched on it, but in Economic Development Committee discussion with the police department, the chief did say he's 100% in support of closing the street. To add on to that, he's working with his contact in Mass Highway to figure out what would need to be done to allow parking the way the Imagine Upton picture shows, 44 parking spots on 140. He believes it has to be declared a business district to allow that. But he's working with Mass Highway to figure that part out for us too.
Good.
So it sounds like, okay. So at one of our next 2 meetings then, we could perhaps open the meeting in the parking lot, get a better feel for what the layout's gonna look like, at that
Can we
point.
do that the next meeting?
That's fine with me. You wanna open the next meeting in the parking lot, so we can get a better feel for?
I
what
thought you
this is
wanted to
like?
do that after the meeting on the 25th.
Actually, yeah, I'd really rather wait until after we get the input from the state and see that's gonna answer a lot of questions with respect to they're considering reconfiguring 140 all the way from William Street to Brook Street. So it'd be nice to kind of get their timetable and what their thoughts are, again, with the roundabout and the rotary. So, okay.
If we, what's the process to put out an RFP and get that work done? How long is that going to take? Because if we're trying to have something done by mid-fall, I would think time is of the essence.
Right, so what we would have to do, once we get the green light, we'd have to go back to the engineer and do one final construction design, so we know exactly because we need big specifications. So that'll take probably, what do you think, Kelly, a couple of weeks he turns that stuff around?
Yeah.
He's been pretty good turning
Yeah,
plans
probably
around.
about 2 to 3 weeks for him to turn that around. We have a cost proposal from him, so it's just a matter of him turning it around with the scope.
So, yeah, so we'll look at early August, putting out to bid. You gotta put it out to bid for at least 30 days, so it takes you early September. It'll take you a few weeks to award the contract, execute the contract. So that'll take you into the 1st of October minimum. So that's your timeline.
Is there
And
any
that's
way?
based upon in July.
Is there any way to start that process now? Or do you need anything from us to finalize that design, or can that design be finalized and you can start that 2 to 3 week process
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly.
without us making a decision on
Based upon what I
temporary
said
closure?
verbally,
Yeah,
about not, just extending the parking and not reconfiguring that access point,
mm-hmm,
we could start that tomorrow. We could ask that question, have them design that to go out to bid tomorrow. But, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood what we were trying to accomplish.
right.
before we-
And could that be done, and that sounds like that could be done
For the July meeting.
for the July meeting.
Absolutely.
So that way there, it sounds like we still would have time to make the decision on closing Warren Street or not, but we also wouldn't be holding up moving that process forward with a fall timeline, so we sort of can keep both things moving.
I guess my only other question is, what would we be using for a funding source?
We have identified CPC dollars that were used for the town hall renovation. There was a small balance remaining from the town hall renovations that was sitting in an article that Kelly went to CPC. She presented this plan to them, and they agreed that this was falls in the definition of the purpose of that funding for the renovation of this building.
So then if we meet, then, if you can get the paperwork side and the estimating side done, we'll meet sometime after the 6:25 meeting, and we can bring all these things together. See what the plans actually look like, meet in the parking lot, see what it's gonna look like, and make the decision at that point.
Okay.
All right? All right. Let's see. And again, look ahead topics, discuss financial reserve policy. We kind of beat that one up quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. We have that decision with, or at least some contracted work with DLS coming up. So we can discuss that further when they start doing their work.
Yeah.
Sound reasonable? Okay. Section 8.3, committee appointments. I'm not sure we have anything.
No, not yet. It's going to be on a future agenda.
Right.
It's a placeholder.
Okay. So moving on.
If I could just because 2 items came up today, and I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I met with the chairman of CPC this afternoon, and she has offered to come before the board and do a presentation on the CPC, how it works here in town, some of the projects that have been funded over the years that CPC's been here in town, and the current balances for each one of the 4 accounts. So she's offered to come in at the next meeting if the board so desires.
I would, I'd be very interested in that. That sounds good.
Yeah.
June 4th, if we could have her come in.
Okay.
Just an aside note, I happened to be at a Worcester County League meeting last Friday night, and Grafton, one of the reps from Grafton stood up and had mentioned Grafton used $450,000 of CPC money to buy some open space off of Stowe Road, which is kind of adjacent to their Silver Lake area. So he was singing high praise of CPC dollars. So be interested to see how our funds are doing, and of course we use them for various purchases. So.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I just have one more item as a look-ahead topic, because it came up again today at staff. So the Recreation Commission has finished their master plan, and the Recreation Director has offered to come before the board and present the final master plan, so that everybody here in the community understands what the Recreation Commission plans to do with recreation facilities and activities over the next 5+ years. So again, if the board desires, he's willing to come in on June 4th as well.
Okay.
Great.
So we'll go with that. Yeah. I think we can. I think it's only a few weeks away, so we shouldn't have too busy of an agenda. We'll bring them both in. Yeah.
Great.
Sounds good. All right. Any other questions? Move on to public comment. I know I did receive an email earlier in the week. Would you like to ask a question to the board?
Derek.
If you could please come up and introduce yourself.
Greg Wyman, Beetlesheim Road. Derek had actually answered most of my questions. One thing I was just curious about is if we were interested in maybe starting a church reuse committee to kind of help the developers to figure out ways to make the church like kind of economically viable and figure out businesses that we might be able to put in to kind of spur economic growth for the town. So I don't know if that would be something that would be interested in doing. I don't know how that type of thing gets looked at. I don't know how communities get started. I'm kind of new to the whole process. So.
Yeah. Typically, the board would discuss that. We'd have to have an agenda item to discuss it, and then it would be the decision of the board whether or not to create another committee. So that's something I guess we would have to discuss at a future meeting, and then decide if that's something that we wanted to have a standalone committee for that, or maybe have that be part of the working groups. I guess that might be something that we might want to discuss.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Okay. So, very good. All right. Any other public comment? All right. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Are you sure? Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Make that unanimous action? All right.
You.
Thank you.